So you worked for the National Park Service for
Yes,
30
I
years?
worked for them as a student on the Historic American Building Survey 40 years ago, and Gettysburg was 1958 or 57, and came to Harpers Ferry at that time and thought, what a wonderful place it is. And I have a son that's doing it 40 years later. He's a foreman of a job measuring the powerhouse here in Harpers Ferry. So I think he's latched onto something that's pretty special. He says he likes it very much.
Now, how long have you been living in Harpers Ferry then?
28 years, 27, 28 years.
And you came here with the Park Service?
Yes, the Park Service was closing their Office of Design and Construction in Philadelphia. I had a choice of going to Washington, D.C., or seemed to be one other place. But Harpers Ferry was opening, 1971, but I came here in 1969, and I was housed in one of the, I think the Paymaster's house, or one of the historic houses once owned by the Armory, until the Design Center was finished in 1971, too. And then my wife and I were married here when the Design building was finished on the terrace overlooking the Shenandoah. So I have no qualms about being married where I work, or that sort of thing. Harpers Ferry has been special to us as a family as well.
Now, but you've done some work around the country at different parks, correct?
Different parks, yeah.
What are some of the more interesting ones?
Well, the interesting ones, well, let me tell you that some of it was design work, but some of it was preliminary, such as an interpretive plan. How are we going to interpret this historic site to the public? And what media best tells the story? In some cases, a film might tell the story a little better. In some cases, they have a lot of objects, wonderful objects that tell the story. So you use a museum type thing. Maybe something is best to be written and they take it home and read it later. Or, you know, what is the best media to tell the story? You have X number of dollars for interpretation. And then sometimes we have historic furnishings like presidents' houses, like the Adams Mansion in Quincy, Mass. And Harpers Ferry is in charge of restoring the furnishings and so forth there. So you see, and I also had worked up there as a student when I worked for HABS, so that it all tied in with my interest in historic buildings like the Adams Mansion. John Adams, and John Quincy Adams, John Francis Adams lived there. So it tied in historically with historic objects and art.
So you've mentioned you worked in Philadelphia. Have you in Gettysburg? What other kinds of interesting places have you worked? If we're going around the country
I was lucky enough to win a Presidential Design Award for the Second Bank of the United States, which was a bank designed by Strickland in 1837. And it was one the Biddle family had opened under President Jackson, because the banks were shut down not too long after that. In other words, they were nationalized, or whatever you want to say. And the banking, some presidents were, well, Jackson especially thought the banks were getting too strong. But anyway, this is a wonderful classical building, like the Parthenon. And it's a block for Independence Hall. It was one of the first ones. Opened for the bicentennial with the Charles Wilson Peel portraits of the signers, the Declaration of Independence. Of course, I worked on Independence Hall and the Dolly Todd Madison House and the Bishop White House in Philadelphia. And also Christ Church. I did the research for the street lighting, which was whale oil lamps with a wonderful tin star on top. I found the prototype in a museum in Doylestown. And so sometimes I get to do some research. Also research on watch boxes and wells. They put me down in a well on a hot July day, and it was my job to do all the strata and what was found there. And also we found the wooden pump, 18th century pump that had been thrown down the bell and buried.
What do you think when you find stuff like that?
It's pretty exciting, because this is it's a little more a new piece of the puzzle to tell us how people lived in the past time.